You know that nagging low back pain, right? That frustrating ache where all the standard tests come back, well, normal? Today, we're putting on our detective hats. We are going to hunt for clues to solve this super common mystery. And our investigation is going to zoom in on one very specific place. So let me just ask you this straight up. What if the secret to your back pain, the real culprit, was hiding deep inside a single muscle? That is the big question we're digging into today, and I think the answer is going to surprise you.
Millions of people get hit with this diagnosis, non-specific low back pain. Now, it's a totally valid diagnosis, but let's be honest, it basically means your back hurts and we're not 100% sure why. It can feel like a total dead end, right? A frustrating mystery with no good leads.
Okay, let's meet our prime suspect, the multifidus muscle. Now, these aren't the big, flashy muscles you see at the gym. Nope. These are a group of small but incredibly important muscles that run right up against your spine. Think of them like the crucial support cables on a bridge. And when those cables get weak or unhealthy, well, the whole structure is in trouble. That's why researchers think they're a major player in that nonspecific pain.
All right, so to crack this case, we have to actually see what's going on deep inside the body. We can't just guess. We need the right investigative tools, imaging that lets us peer past the surface and check on the health of this super important muscle.
So, in this corner, we have the reigning champion, the MRI. It's known as the gold standard for a reason. It gives you these stunningly detailed pictures where you can see fat and muscle crystal clear. The downside? It's pricey and it takes a while. And in the other corner, we've got the challenger, ultrasound. It's way faster, you can bring the machine right to the patient, and it's so much cheaper. But the million-dollar question has always been, is it accurate enough to be a reliable detective?
And that brings us to the main event. A team of researchers set up this brilliant experiment to finally settle the score. They decided to put MRI and ultrasound in a head-to-head competition on the same patients to see if they'd find the same clues in that multifidus muscle. Here's the play-by-play. First, they got a group of patients who all had chronic low back pain. Then they found the exact spot that was most tender. The ouch, right there spot. They scanned that spot with an ultrasound. Then they took a look at a recent MRI of that very same spot. And here's the really clever part. This is just great science. The experts reading the scans were blinded. That means the person looking at the MRI had no idea what the ultrasound showed, and the person with the ultrasound didn't know the MRI results. That's how you make sure nobody's biased.
So what clues were they looking for? Two really big ones. First, something called fatty atrophy. Think of it like this. A healthy muscle is supposed to be lean and mean, but an unhealthy, weak muscle gets infiltrated with fat. It makes it weak, and it can't do its job of supporting your spine. The second thing was the cross-sectional area, which is just a fancy way of saying how big and beefy is the muscle.
So, the moment of truth. Who won? Was the expensive MRI the clear winner, or did the scrappy ultrasound challenger pull off an upset? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. It wasn't a clean knockout. It was a split decision. So let's break down the judges' scorecards, okay? First up, let's look at finding number 1. How well did each tool do at assessing the actual health of the muscle? Looking for that fatty infiltration. Right here on the screen, you can see exactly what they were looking at. On the left, you've got an ultrasound image. On the right, an MRI of the same area. The big question is, were these two pictures telling the same story about the muscle's health? And the answer was a huge, resounding yes. They measured the agreement with a stat called a weighted kappa, and the score was 0.83. Now, you don't need to be a statistician here. All you need to know is that a score of 1.0 would be a perfect identical match. So 0.83, that's an almost perfect match. It means for spotting fatty atrophy, that huge sign of poor muscle health, ultrasound was right there with the gold standard MRI. Incredible. But hold on, what about that second clue? What about measuring the actual size of the muscle? Were they in sync there too? Well, this is where our story takes a sharp turn. When it came to measuring muscle size, the correlation was pretty much zero. Zilch, nada. The measurements from the ultrasound and the MRI just didn't line up at all. So let's be super clear on this. For muscle health, they agreed. For muscle size, they absolutely did not. And here's where it gets even cooler. Look at this chart. That really high 83% agreement, that was specifically at the spot where the patient felt pain. When the researchers checked a different, non-painful spot just for control, the agreement just plummeted. It's like the ultrasound acts as a heat-seeking missile for finding the problem area right at the scene of the crime.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the future? How does this split decision actually change things for people out there dealing with this kind of back pain? This is the real so what moment.
You know, the researchers themselves summed it up perfectly. They said, look, the MRI is probably always going to be the gold standard for getting the big picture. But they said ultrasound could play a huge role for specialists, for physical therapists, as a fast, cheap, and accurate tool. It's a game changer.
So, let's boil it all down. Here are the key takeaways. 1. Ultrasound is a fantastic tool for checking muscle health right where it hurts. 2. It is not the right tool for measuring muscle size. And 3, and this is the big one, this could mean a specialist can do a quick, easy scan right there in the office to help pinpoint a source of your pain, and then use that same tool over time to see if your rehab is actually working.
And there's one last amazing clue the researchers found. Get this. The spots that patients said were the most tender when you pushed on them, those were the exact same spots where the scans showed the most fatty, unhealthy muscle. It creates this powerful link between what you feel and what the technology can see. That tenderness isn't just some vague symptom. It's like a big red arrow pointing right at the problem. So we end on this thought. We started with this frustrating, mysterious, non-specific pain, but this research gives us a brand new tool, a new lens to see the problem. So I'll leave you with this question. Could a simple, cheap scan done right there in a doctor's office totally change how we treat one of the most common ailments on the planet? Based on this evidence, the future is looking pretty bright.